Hi everyone, today's video is on DNS and how it works. DNS stands for Domain Name System. When we access a website, we are using this service to locate the server of the domain's website. Usually, computers don't communicate to each other in the internet through names. They communicate through numbers such as IP addresses. For instance, a website might have an IP address like 74.6.143.26, but for us, this number is difficult to remember, especially when there are a lot of websites that we search for every day. That is why DNS exists. Its purpose is to resolve names to numbers, specifically domain names to IP addresses. So if we type in yahoo.com as the URL in our web browser, it will convert that wording yahoo.com to an IP address because that is how computers understand each other. So this, after the conversion, that particular site will be displayed in our web browser. Now I will be explaining this DNS process in detail. When a user types in a particular URL in the web browser of their computer, the query will first start searching for its IP address, the particular website's IP address in the local DNS cache of that particular laptop. And if this query or the IP address of this site exists in the cache, then the website will be directly loaded into the web browser. But if the IP address cannot be found in the local DNS cache, then the query will travel into the DNS recursive resolver. This server is with the ISP or the Internet Service Provider. The DNS resolver will then check whether it has the IP address of yahoo.com, and if it already has the IP address of yahoo.com, it will end the process from here and communicate back to the laptop with the IP address. But if it also doesn't have the IP address, then the resolver queries to the DNS root server. The root server is the top or the root of the DNS hierarchy. There are 13 original root servers and they are placed around the world. The query that DNS resolver will give to the root server is whether it has the IP address of yahoo.com. But the root server will respond saying no, it does not have that specific IP address, but the root server will respond to the resolver with the address of the TLD server or the top level domain. The TLD stores the address information of the top level domains such as .com, .net, .org and so on. The resolver will then ask the .com TLD server whether it has the IP address for yahoo.com. The TLD server will tell that it does not have that specific IP address, but it will respond with the IP address of the domain name server. So this is the last step of this process. After the TLD server provides the resolver with the authoritative name server, the resolver will ask the authoritative name server whether it has the specific IP address for yahoo.com. The authoritative name server is responsible for having everything about a particular domain. This also includes the IP address. The IP address of yahoo.com is then returned to the resolver from the name server. The resolver will then pass this IP address to the web browser of the user, which will then load the website successfully. This entire process will usually happen in the blink of an eye. If this user wants to access yahoo.com again, the web browser will not have to go through the entire process again because it will already be stored in the local DNS cache.